see where hold on. On New Testament base. Here we thank Hashem that we're able to learn. Everyone should have a for Shlema. And everyone should be safe. Especially learning, we should have the base of Migdash. We're going to start Amar Mar. Amar Mar is maybe it's about 15 lines down. Amar Mar means the master taught, and we're going back to explain a brisa. Brisa was discussing Achiv Shlei Haya Ba'olamai, a brother that was not alive at the time when a brother that was not born yet at the time when the brother passed away and left over a widow. So let's say Reuven passed away and left his wife Leah as a widow. So Levi wasn't born yet. That was the case. So Amar Mar, the master taught, Amad Hasheni lasis maimer biyavamte v'lehispik lasis maimer biyavamte ad shenelad layach umeis Risheni yetz mishamesh zachar shlei ba'olamai shniya eichelet tzayim Yevamos. So the case was like this. Shimon, who was alive when Reuven passed away, he attempted to do maimer. Amad, he got up to do maimer. Maimer is a type of kedushin. It's a betrothal to the wife. It's not the actual marriage. It's like a pre-marriage. So he wanted to do maimer on Leah, which is Reuven's widow, but he didn't manage to do it until Levi was born. Okay, now Shimon passed away. The Gemara is going to ask, what are you telling me? He tried and he wasn't able. Like, what's your point? If he wasn't able to, he wasn't able to. What does trying have to? There is no halachic ramification of trying. So, just he didn't do maimer. So what's the issue over there? So, but what's the rule? He passed away. Shimon then passed away, and he tried to do maimer. He didn't get it. He didn't manage. So Leah, which is Reuven's wife, Reuven's widow, the first widow, Levi, who was born after Reuven passed away, does not do yibum or chalitz on her. That's Achiv Shlei Haya Ba'olamai. That's he wasn't around, so there's no yibum there. That's a regular sister-in-law, which is prohibited by the Torah, and there's no mitzvah of yibum that allows that. What about the second one, Shniya? That was Rachel. Shniya is the second one, is Shimon's wife. Levi was around when Shimon was around. He was born when Shimon was around. Shimon just passed away recently. He also has a wife. Rachel, we called her. So what about her? So that's a regular case of Yibam, and you can do Yibam or Chalitza. The Gemara asks, "My amad, my loy hispik. I avad avad, v'loy avad loy avad." What do you mean? He was about to, but he didn't manage to. If he was able to, then he was able to. If he wasn't able to, then he wasn't able. What is the halachic ramifications of I wanted to? Like the students. I wanted to do my homework. You have to give me points. Okay. So what it means over here is Ela amad midaita lihispik midaita labal karchad like Rebbe. The idea here is he wanted to convince her to accept it, but he wasn't able to. So he just forced it on her. Maimer is probably a document. It's just a document that says, you're betrothed or whatever. So he forced it on her. That's what we're talking about. He's trying to, doesn't mean he didn't do anything. It means he did something. It just wasn't with her consent. And the Delaika Rebbe, this doesn't follow the opinion of Rebbe. What are we talking about? The Tanya, we have a brisa. So it's a very interesting thing. Marriage is only with a woman's consent. There's no such thing as you're forced into a marriage. Maybe with the child, that's possible, but then she can jump out of it if was done by the brothers. Maimer, not Maimer, Miyun. But marriage is always midaita. She always needs to have consent. There's an exception to that, and that's by Yibam. Yibam, the levirate marriage, he takes over the brother's relationship, and that will work even without her consent. But what about Maimer? Maimer is a stage before the Yibam. So it works like this. Maimer bi Yevamte Shlemi Daite. Rebbe Yomer Kana. Rebbe says Maimer also works, just like the Yibam works without her consent. So does the Maimer work? The Chum say no, it doesn't. You have an exemption, you have a special rule about Yibam that it works, but that doesn't apply to Maimer. My time at the Rebbe, what's the reason for Rebbe that he says that it works? Well, he says, Gamar Mibiya di Yevama. This is just a consummation of the marriage of the Yevama. And what happens by the Bia of the Yevama, the actual intimacy of the Yavam with the Yevama, it's even without the Yevama's consent. The brother takes over the deceased, takes over that marriage. Just like when it comes to the consummation of the Yibam, that's without her consent. So to the Kedushin of the Yevama, the Maimer of the Yevama is without her consent. That whole story is all without the woman's consent, the widow's consent. For Rabbanan, the Rabbanan say no. Gamri Kedushin da Alma. This is a Kedushin like any other Kedushin. Ma Kedushin da Alma midaita, Kedushin da Yevama midaita. The question is, what do we compare Maimer to? Do you compare it to Kedushin or do you compare it to Yibam? If you compare it to Kedushin, then it needs her consent. If you compare it to Yibam, then it doesn't need her consent. So what we're saying here is that we're going to compare it to Kedushin, and it needs her consent, and therefore this was not considered Maimer. And he attempted to do Maimer, but he wasn't able to. And what we're saying is we're not following Rebbe. Rebbe holds that Maimer works even without her consent. What is the basis of this machlekes? One of them says that we should learn Yevama matters from Yevama matters. Other one says we learn Kedushin from Kedushin matters. Yeah. Which topic does Maimer go under? In the Smicha course. Does it go under Kedushin or does it go under Yibam? So, okay. Asaba Maimer. Now we go further in the Brisa. Let's say he actually did Maimer. That means Reuven passed away and left the widow Leah. Shimon is the brother, is supposed to do Yibam. First step of Yibam would be Maimer. And he did Maimer. Then there's a brother that's born, Levi. Levi is born. Or maybe Levi was born and then they did Maimer. Umes. Shimon passed away. The question is, the discussion here is, what is Levi's relationship now with Leah and with Shimon's wife, which is Rachel? And what is their relationship to each other? Are they considered co-wives, rival wives? Because Maimer was performed. That makes them sort of connected. So maybe Chalitza on one should help. Rishayna, so the Brisa says the first one, which is Leah, Yetz Mishom, Eishes Achor Shlei Beilamed. Nothing is required for her. Sounds like the Maimer does nothing. Ushniya, and the second one, which is Rachel, Cheletzes V'leimes Yabemes. You only do Chalitza. Well, why only Chalitza? Sounds like the Maimer possibly had some effect. Can't do Yibam because it's a co-wife with Eishes Achor Shlei Beilamed. Reb Shimon says, Biyasa Eichalitzase Shalachzimem Piteres Tzarasa. Yibam works on either one, and then the other one is exempt. Reb Shimon Ahekai. What's Reb Shimon talking about? Which case? There were two cases there. If you said that it's talking about where Levi was born before the Maimer was performed, so Levi was born when Leah was still in limbo. She was waiting for Yibam to take place. Yibam didn't take place, Maimer didn't take place, and then Levi's born. It's a regular case of Eishes Achor Shlei Beilamed. He was born right after the death of Reuven, before the Yibam. We went through this yesterday. You told me that Reb Shimon doesn't. Rabbi Shia held that he argued, but we disagreed with Rabbi Shia. We said that if Reuven is born, if Levi is born after the death of Reuven, before the Yibum, so it doesn't is never permitted to Leah. Even Reb Shimon would hold that. Ella also but Maimer we're talking about where Maimer was performed. And over there, Reb Shimon would say that because the Maimer was performed, Levi was born into a situation where Leah was in a status of heter. She's already considered married to Shimon, and the relationship of the obligation of Yibam is basically finished because she's already became a new wife. And it's not considered a sister-in-law that's prohibited to him because she's already married. Okay. Now we have another case of the Brisa. Cholatz lebalas maimer. Let's say Levi, after Shimon passes away, he has two women there that he's supposed to be doing Yibam on one of them. Okay, but Levi does now. Maimer was done by Shimon, and Shimon passed away. Levi goes over to Leah, who was the Balas Maimer. She's the one that received the document of Kedushin. Levi goes over to her and does chalitza. Why is he doing chalitza on her? Because she's the wife of Shimon, and Shimon just passed away. It's his brother. She's also the wife of Reuven. But Reuven also passed away. But we're ignoring Reuven because Reuven would not be a relationship here with Levi because that wouldn't work. So Shimon passed away. So he's doing chalitza on Leah. Lay nifter tzara. Rachel still needs something done to her. My timer. What's the reason? Mishum dahav yitzara vadai ubalas maimer safek. Bein safek maitzi midei vadai. Let's do it the other way. The other way is easier. Let's say he did chalitza on Rachel. That's a perfect case because it works like this. He does chalitza on Rachel, not on Leah. Then let's say Maimer is a real kinyan, and Shimon is considered married to Leah. Then you only have to do chalitza on one wife, which he did. And that would exempt Leah because he did chalitza on Rachel. You only have to do one. Let's say Maimer is not a good kinyan. Then he did chalitza on Rachel. What about Leah? Well, Maimer's not a good kinyan. And Leah is the widow of Reuven, so he doesn't have to do anything there. Right. So he was exempt even before anything started. So that would be perfect. The problem is he did it the other way. He did chalitza on Leah. Maybe the chalitza is nothing, because maybe he didn't need anything. Because maybe she was married to, maybe she's still in a relationship with Reuven that requires Yibam. The Maimer didn't fix that problem. So how are you going to resolve Rachel? Rachel, I know, needs Yibam or chalitza. That's a vadai. So what the Gemara says, vein safek maitzi midei vadai. The chalitza on Leah doesn't resolve a chalitza or Yibam on Rachel.
What did he do first? Did he do the Maimer on?
Shimon did a Maimer on Leah.
Okay.
Then comes along, and then he passed away. Now comes along Levi and does chalitza on Leah. We say that doesn't resolve Rachel. If a chalitza on Rachel would have resolved Leah, but not the other way around. Yeah.
Rabbi, who came up with this idea of Maimer? It's a Derabanan.
Yeah. However, we're going to see that it's problematic just to say that it's entirely a derabanan. What we want to say, what we're going to try to say is that it's a rabbanan that's based on a daraisa that gives it a bit of a more of a status.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, don't forget the Zika is part of this. So the Zika, according to Reb Shimon, was also something. It's like a mimer with a Zika that, that also made them connected. Yeah.
Mimer with Zika.
Okay, Yosef Ramanasha Bar Zvid, Kamida Ravuna. Yosef Kamar. My time with the Reb Shimon. What's Reb Shimon's reason? Reb Shimon held that if Levi is born after Shimon has already performed Yibam, so then Levi's would now be permitted to Leah if Shimon passed away, even though she was the wife of Reuven earlier, but she sort of like gets kosherized by becoming married to Shimon. Gemara asks, my time with Reb Shimon? What's the reason for Reb Shimon? Kedamar time. He said his reason. It's like gets attacked for asking a question that that was already explained. He says when Levi was born, Leah was permitted him because she was already remarried to Shimon. My time with the Rabbanan. The question goes the other way. What's the reason for the Rabbanan that say that Leah is still prohibited even after she's remarried? I'm on the bottom of Yates. I'm about to go to Chaf. So it's like 2 lines from the bottom. Amar Kra, the pasuk says, takes her for a wife and he does Yibam. Adayin Yibum Marishainim Allah. The rabbis say that because she's called a Yevama, even after she's married, that means that she still is connected to Reuven. She is the Yevama. She's not like just a wife. She is the Yevama. If that's the case, you want to say she's still always a status of a Yevama. She still is Reuven's widow, even after she's married. And therefore, when Levi is born, she's considered Reuven's widow. And that's why the rabbis say that Levi can never do Yibam on her even afterwards. We have a mission that says like this. Let's say Shimon marries her. Becomes his wife for all matters. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina says, that means if he divorces her now, after he did Yibam, he gives her a regular get. He doesn't have to do chalitza. And not only that, umachzira. Remember, she's his sister-in-law. She's prohibited to him. But because of the mitzvah of Yibam, she's permitted. Now, he divorced her. He can remarry her. She becomes cleansed from the sister-in-law prohibition, and she becomes a regular wife. So what are you telling me? She's called a Yevama. She's not a Yevama. She's a regular wife. He can even remarry her, and the mitzvah of Yibam is gone. It's a very strong support for Reb Shimon. What do the rabbis hold? Gemara says, "Hasamnami lema v'yibma v'adayin yivum rishayim alav v'tibay chalitza." Why doesn't she require chalitza? Why just a get? Why is he allowed to remarry her? The Gemara says, "Shani hasam damakra v'lachale leisha." Says he takes her for a wife. Kivan shalakha. Once he marries her, nasas kishta l'chol davar, becomes his wife. Says he hachanami. So then you can't have have the cake and eat it too, or something. You can't. You're taking both sides of it here. This doesn't work. She can't be prohibited to Levi and also a regular wife to Shimon. Says Hakasav Rachmana v'Yibma. Says no, because it says v'Yibma. So it says a Marisa. So what's making you say that she's prohibited to Levi and she's a regular wife to Shimon? Maybe switch it around. Maybe she's permitted to Levi. I have one pasuk that tells me she's a Yevama. I have another pasuk that says she's a regular wife. So we're saying, oh, that means she's prohibited to Levi because she's still a Yevama. That means she's still associated to Reuven, who's Eishes Achiv Shleya Ba'elamai. But she's also a regular wife to Shimon. That means she just gets a get and she could get remarried. Maybe it's the opposite. The Gemara says, Mistabra, Shadi Atera, Atera, Shadi Surah, Surah. I'll put the Isura. The prefix in Aramaic is on. Shadi means to throw. Shadi hetera hetera. Throw the heter on the heter. That means the fact that she's permitted to Shimon will throw the velak halay isha, that she's a regular wife, on that, and the fact that she's still a Yevama will throw that on Levi, who's the prohibition. Will make her still a Yevama regarding Levi. We'll make her regular wife regarding Shimon, because we have a support for each of those from the verse.
Right.
Okay. Well, Rab Shimon, what about Rab Shimon? That she's permitted to Levi. What does she do? What does he do with that Yevama? Well, what the Gemara asks, it takes it differently. It says, we're like just throwing in a wild question. Okay, what happened here was like this. Let's say Yitzchak was married earlier and has a son. Could jump already. Doesn't have to be Yitzchak, it could be Yaakov. Yaakov was married, but then I'm going to lose the Rivka. So Yitzchak was married earlier and has a son, Reuven. Rivka was also married earlier and had a daughter, Dina. All right. Then Yitzchak and Rivka get married.
Yitzchak and Rivka.
Yeah. Okay, now Reuven and Dina are allowed to marry. They're not related. Just because Yitzchak marries Rivka has no relationship with Reuven and.
They were born before.
They were born from previous marriage. So now Levi's born.
As a product of that
A
marriage.
product of the marriage. So he's a half brother, a half sister. Okay. Umeis. Now Reuven, who's married to Dina, passes away. So what happens now with he's a brother from the father to Reuven. Okay, that means he's a half brother. It means from the father. It means he has to do Yibam. The only problem is that Dina happens to be his half sister, also because they share the same mother. So what we say is like this: let them do Yibam. When he was born, Reuven was alive. And Reuven's alive. It's not Esha Sachiv Shleihaya Bailamai. It was Bailamai. She's around. So the Gemara asks straight away, what are you talking about? It's a sister. How did you wipe away the sister problem? Where did that go? She just says, well, Hachanami Yisra Achiv Shleihaya Bailamai Lehechanazal. Where did that go? Esha Sachiv Shleihaya Bailamai. Where did that go? When he was born, I missed one case in here. It must be that there was a previous marriage also. It must be that there was another brother here that got married, and the Shimon married. No, how did that work? There must have been two brothers. It must have been Reuven Shimon from a previous marriage. Reuven passed away. Then Shimon marries Dina because she's also not related to her. And then Levi's born, and Shimon had wiped away the Esha Sachiv Shleihaya Bailamai, and Levi's born into the scenario where Reuven is out of the picture already. So Leah, no, it's not Leah now, it's Dina. Dina has been cleansed from being a sister-in-law of a brother that wasn't around in the world together. Where did that go? So we said, well, we tried to say that this woman gets entirely cleansed from everything. We said, what are you talking about? She gets cleansed from Ishasach, from being a sister-in-law. That's the only thing that she gets cleansed from. She doesn't get cleansed from being a sister. Okay. It seemed a little obvious, but okay. Now we have a new Mishnah. Klal Amar b'Yevama. We have a rule that's said it by Yevamas. Kol shu iser erva. Anything that's a very close relationship, leicheletzes v'leimus yabemis. Yibam or chalitza are not performed. That means, like we said before, let's say Ruvain marries Leah, but it turns out that Leah was Shimon's daughter. Married his niece. That's the case. And when Reuven passes away, Shimon cannot do Yibum on his daughter, of course, but not only on his daughter, but he can't do on any other wife of Reuven as well, because it's a tzara to erva. Okay. That was easy. Isser mitzvah, isser kedusha. The Mishnah itself is going to explain what that means. Those prohibitions, women that weren't allowed to be married for certain reasons, chalitza is performed on Leah, but not Yibam. Yeah, it's missing the scenario. What happened over here was that Reuven and Shimon are married to Rachel and Leah. Those are sisters. Reuven's married to Leah, Shimon's married to Rachel. They both pass away. Now Levi is not allowed to do Yibam on any of them. Why? Because they're on either of them, because it's Achayse Kukase. This is the sister of the woman that he's supposed to marry. Either one, Rachel and Leah, are both sisters of the woman that he's supposed to marry, that he's attached to. So it's like Achayse Ishta. It's like he's marrying his wife's sister. It's prohibited. However, let's say Levi is actually the father of Leah. Levi was married. He had a daughter, Leah. Ruvain marries his niece, Leah. How's it going to work? Yeah, Ruvain married his niece, Leah. And Shimon married Rachel. Okay, whatever. Now, yeah, they're sisters. They are, yeah, they're sisters. So that means Levi, how could Levi be the father of both? It must have been from a different wife. But yeah, because we're trying to make that there's no relationship Levi to Rachel. There's only a relationship Levi to Leah. So if that's the case, they have the same mother. That's it. They have the same mother, but not the same father. So Levi's not related at all to. Yeah, this is going to be complicated. How does Levi end up not being related at all? It's not his wife's. I think the way we did this before is like Basanusase or something. It was a daughter from a woman that he wasn't married to, because you're not allowed to marry a woman and her daughter. He has to be permitted to Rachel. So whatever the case is, what we say is like this, that the problem of Achayse Kukase falls off because Leah has no attachment to Levi because of that relationship that they had previously. Forget about the sister-in-law. There's no so when it comes time for Yibam, there's only one option here. That's Rachel, because Leah was related. So we say like this: Achaysa shehi yevimta, the sister, which is the Yevama, that you can do chalitza or Yibam. We don't say that there's a problem of Achaysa Kukase. Yeah, how to get to that is going to be complicated. Yeah, the case that I took is going to be complicated to work. It would have to be a previously it's his daughter-in-law or it's his mother-in-law. That could work. That way there's only a relationship to one of them, even though they're sisters. Yeah. Shnius midivrei seifrim. I'm sorry, I skipped the word. Isser mitzvah. What is the Isser mitzvah? That's shnius midivrei seifrim. That means those are secondary relationships that are only forbidden because of rabbinic law. They're relatives, but it's not. We have an example for that.
Like close.
It's not close.
That close. Or cousins.
Well, it's not cousins. Maybe like a mother-in-law's mother or something. Those. What about Isser Kedusha? Prohibitions because of holiness. That's Almana l'kayin gadol. That's a widow marrying a kayin gadol, or grusha v'chalitza l'kayin hedyet, or a divorcee, or a chalutza, which is also a type of divorcee. To a regular kayin, mamzeres unesina liyisrael, a child that's born from a adulterous relationship, or a nesina, which comes from the Givainim, or it's a tribe. There was a tribe that we said that they can't marry into the Jewish people. Or Bas Yisrael and Nasan Mamzer, the opposite. Or if it's a girl that's wants to marry a Mamzer or a Nasan, a child of an adulterous relationship, or one of the Givainim men. Okay, so those are Isser Kedusha. We said by them are you only do Chalitza. The Gemara says, what are you telling me a rule? Whenever you tell me a rule, you're trying to include something. What are you trying to include? Notice what we said. That's the rule. The rule was anything that's prohibited because it's a forbidden relationship, you don't do yibam on her or on the tzara. Okay. What are you coming to include? We had 15 of those in the first parak, in the first Mishnah.
Right.
So we say what you're coming to include is the co-wife of a woman that's not developed enough to be able to have children. Now, since this woman can't have children anyway, and the whole mitzvah of Yibam is to establish the seed of the brother, so the co-wife is also exempt from Yibam or Chalitza. That's what we're learning. Vikadamri, some say it differently. Now, why is she called a tzaras erva? Well, she's a sister-in-law that's prohibited. But the mitzvah of Yibam doesn't apply, so she becomes an erva. And because she's an erva, so that means a woman that's prohibited to marry. So then the co-wife is also prohibited. Vikadamri, some say, Kol Shisura erva hudasira. Hudasira tzarasa. Halaya isur isur erva tzarasa layasira. Lemuti ma yamara from our papa. Lemuti tzarasail said laker avasi. Some say it's actually saying exactly the opposite. Who is prohibited? Only if it's a real erva. But this woman is not an erva. She's just an islandess. So therefore, you're allowed to marry the tzara. The yibam is performed on the co-wife, not on the islandess, not on the woman that's not developed, but on the co-wife it is. And this is not like the way Ravasi said that a tzaras erva is exempt. Tzaras islandess is exempt. Okay. Next case. The sister, that's the Yevama. We're talking over here about the two sisters that fell to the Yevama, to the Yavam, and really Yibam cannot be performed, but because there's a relationship to one of them, so then it's not considered that two sisters fell, it's considered only one sister is up for Yibam.
Oh, wow.
So then he can do Yibam as well.
But you still can't have two sisters being
Co-wife.
wife,
Right.
right?
Here we
But
were
you still
saying,
count it as one, so I don't understand.
here we're saying that if Yibam is supposed to be performed on one of two sisters, normally you don't do Yibam at all, you just do Chalitza. Because there's two brothers, each married one sister, and they both passed away. So we say that each sister is considered a sister of the woman that he's supposed to marry. which
So,
makes it his, like, as if it's his wife's sister, which he's not allowed to marry.
so how can?
How over here is it going to work?
Yeah.
So we say that over here because one of them he's not supposed to marry anyway, because one of them is his mother-in-law, or one of them is his daughter-in-law from a different somehow, was previously his daughter-in-law. So then, if that's the case, then really only one of these sisters is eligible for Yivam, and that would be a permissible marriage.
Mhm.
So, good morning.
Morning.
So it says, Achayse Deman, whose sister? Ilay with the Isser mitzvah. If we say it's the Isser mitzvah, what do we say was a mitzvah? That means that it's only a rabbinic prohibition here. The fact is that there's a biblical obligation here of Yibam on her. So it still is considered from a biblical standpoint that it's the sister of his Zakukah, of the woman that he's supposed to marry. It says, it must be that it's the sister of Isser Erva. That means it's also a biblical prohibition, and that's why there's only eligible for one. Isser Mitzvah Shni'is. We said that what's an Isser Mitzvah? That's only a secondary relationship. My Karli Isser Mitzvah. If it's only rabbinic, why are you calling it prohibited because of a mitzvah? The term mitzvah is coming in because it's a mitzvah to follow the sages. Yeah, we've had similar quotations. Isser Kedusha. What is a prohibition because of holiness? We said that's Almana l'kain gadol grusha v'chalitza l'kain hedid. That's if it's a widow that's married to a kain gadol. We're gonna go two ways with this. We're gonna go that if a brother of a kain gadol passes away, leaves a widow, he's not going to be able to do Yibam. Or if the Kohen Gadol happened to be married to an Almana,
That's
how did he do that? He did it in he was prohibited.
Oh,
But the marriage still takes effect. He was also not going to do Yibam. The brother is also not going to do when he passes away, because that was a forbidden marriage in the first place. Okay, we'll go two ways, but first we discuss or if it's a regular divorcee to a regular kayan. But my karli Isser Kedusha, why is it called Isser Kedusha? Prohibited because of holiness. Because they should be holy to their God. Okay, that's why it's called Kedusha. Tanya was taught in a brisa Rabbi Yehuda Machlef. We said that an Isser mitzvah was a rabbinically prohibited relative, and Isser Kedusha was the Kayan prohibition. Rabbi Yehuda says it the other way. He says Isser mitzvah is Almana l'kain gadol grusha v'chalitza l'kain hedid. It's the rabbinic. It's the Kohen prohibitions. But my call Isser mitzvah. Why is it called Isser mitzvah? So it says the Ksiv Eila mitzvahs. At the end of that chapter, it says this verse, Eila ha-mitzvahs. These are the mitzvahs. We say that it's talking about all the prohibitions of Kayanim. So because that verse, Eila ha-mitzvahs, is said about the prohibitions of Kayanim, so we call it mitzvah. Isser Kedusha, what is that? Shniyas midivrei seifrim. These are the secondary relatives that are prohibited only because of rabbinic law. But my call Isser Kedusha. So why is it called Isser Kedusha? Because of holiness. Amarambaya says, anyone that follows the sages is called holy. Amalei Rava says to Abaya, someone that doesn't fulfill the words of the sages. So you want to say he's just not called holy, but he's not called a Rasha? Anyone familiar with this saying? Familiar with this? Someone that violates a rabbinic prohibition is not called a Rasha. It's called a Rasha. Page 1 of Tanya.
Oh, right, yeah.
As it says in the second chapter of Yevamos. That's what the Alter Rebbe quotes. Yeah. Afilu ha'ivra al Isser kal sh'divrei seifrim nikra Rasha k'disa perik beis Yevamos.
That's derived from here,
This
that
is this
concept in
piece.
the Tanya.
Yeah.
Because I think I know, like the Rambam, has a different method of calculating,
Oh, whose goes? There was like 24 people or something of Malchus or something. Who's called the Russia?
Yeah, Rambam, I think Rambam just says if you have
Oh,
more
you're
Pharaohs,
yeah. Okay,
then
okay, very good.
it
Yeah,
says
yeah,
that
yeah,
it's the
exactly.
Russia.
Yeah, yeah. That the Alter Rebbe says was referring to the term over there. Tzaddik means vindicated. Doesn't mean actually tzaddik. Just means that.
Oh, yeah.
Elama Rava, rather Rava says kadesh atzmacha b'mutalach. When the rabbis make a decree, they're making something prohibited. They're making us holy, even though this was permitted beforehand. Okay, usually we say Kaddish Atzmacha b'mutalach is referring to what we take on ourselves to sanctify ourselves, even though it's permitted. Here we're saying that it actually becomes prohibited. But because it wasn't prohibited biblically, it's considered where it's sanctified. Almana l'kayin gadol, a widow to a kayin gadol. Kapasik v'tani. We said this as like a blanket statement. You didn't say what was going on over there. Let's say the widow is not a widow from a marriage. She's a widow from being betrothed. That means that her marriage was never consummated, but she's still a widow. Her fiance passed away. Now, can the Kohen Gadol do Yivam on her? She's still a virgin. Kohen Gadol is supposed to marry a basula. That's a positive command. Isha b'bsula yikach. He should marry a virgin. There's also a negative prohibition. He should not marry a widow. Here, she's a widow, so she has the negative, but she also has the positive. She doesn't. It's not a violation of a positive. So when we said over here, Almana l'kayin gadol, there's a problem. We didn't say what type of Almana. And we understand why you can't do Yibam if she was already married once. You have the positive command that he has to take a virgin. Yeah, of course, there's a positive command of Yibam, but the positive command is going to need to push off a positive and a negative. Because by now, the positive command that he's supposed to marry a Yevama is only strong enough to push off a negative. But here you have a positive also that he's not take. It's a neglect of a positive. He's supposed to marry a virgin. She's not a virgin.
That reminds me of the sugya we were into of Tasan, Lo Tasan.
Yeah, we had that at the beginning. Yeah, you can't forget anything over here. In a positive command of Yibam can't push off both a negative prohibition that he's not allowed to marry a widow and the positive prohibition that he's supposed to take a virgin. This would be pushing off both of those. Elamina Erison, but if she was only betrothed, let's say Greda means alone. It's only a Leisa say alone itself. Yava Yaseh, let the Aseh of Yibam, the positive command of Yibam, be it say and push off the negative prohibition that he's not supposed to take a widow. Sounds like a real issue. Rav Gidl Amarav. Rav Gidl says the name of Rav Amarkra. We have a pasuk Valsi Yevamte Yashara. The Yevama goes up to the gate, and the Yevama over there says that this man does not want to take. He refuses to marry his brother's wife. Shein Talmud Lema Yevamte. You have an extra word over there. We know who it is. Ma Talmud Lema Yevamte. Why is it saying that Yevamte is Yevama? Lema Yesh Yevama Achas Sha'ila Chalitza Veina Ila Yivam. What it's saying is that there's a Yevama. This extra word is telling me that there is a type of Yevama that only goes for Chalitza, not for Yivam. And this is if there's a negative prohibition itself.
Or are they
without the Aseh.
Yevama that only goes for food. So does that mean?
It means usually when
Yeah.
well, that she only has one option. But you see, the statement that she goes up to say is that this man is not taking is rejecting to take his brother's wife. The truth is that in this case, he can't anyway. He can't anyway. But that's what we're saying is that there is a possibility that should happen where he's not able to take his brother's wife anyway, and chalitza is still performed. Maybe you have to do a chalitza, even if it's chayve krisis, even if he's not able to because of a much stricter prohibition. Usually we said chayvi krisis. You don't do any chalitza or yibam.
Right, yeah.
And chayvi lavin, we're saying that you're going to do chalitza. Maybe it's also chayvi krisis. Amakra im layachbetzish lekachas hachafetz miyabim. It has to be that if he would want, he could do yibam. You have to be eligible to do yibam. It says hihachi chayve lavin nami. So then why do you just say that you do chalitza by chayve lavin if it's a negative prohibition to marry her? So it says, well, we have a pasuk, Rabbi Yerachmana Yevamte. But the Torah says Yevamte. We have an extra pasuk there. Mara Isa. So what made you include chayve lavin and not include chayve krisis? Maybe go the opposite. Where it says, well, mistabra, it's logical. Chayve lavin tafsa b'kedushin. Chayve krisis le tafsa b'kedushin. If a marriage is performed against what the Torah prescribes, does the marriage take effect? And by chayve lavin, it does. And by chayve krisis, it doesn't. It's not. There's no marriage there. It's not like they need a divorce. There's nothing. But by chayve lavin, they need a divorce. Masiv Rava. Rava has a question. Isser mitzvah v'isser kedusha. It's one of those cases where he wasn't supposed to do yibam because she's prohibited him for one of these reasons. Either isser mitzvah. What was isser mitzvah? We said that was a rabbinic relationship that was prohibited. It was the way the Mishnah described it. Or isser kedusha was a Kohen type of prohibited relationship. Let's say he actually lived with her, or he did chalitza, niftera tzarasa. The co-wife is exempt. If you say that this is a Torah prescribed way of resolving this, that you only do chalitza, you don't do yibam. The Torah says that you don't do yibam on chayvi lavin. So kibala my nifter tzarasa. So why, if you do yibam, does she get exempt? There was never that option. Why does the co-wife get exempt because of yibam on someone that yibam wasn't prescribed for? So humaisav lav humafarekla. So Rava, who asked the question, Rava asked the question. He also answers it. He says litzdad and katani. There were two cases there. One was isser mitzvah. One was isser kedusha. The isser mitzvah, you do chalitza. The isser kedusha, the isser mitzvah, which was the rabbinic law, that you can do yibam also. Not you can. If you did yibam, it exempts, because biblically yibam was possible. The isser kedusha, which was only a possibility of chalitza, so chalitza would work, but not yibam. So it's litzdad. Litzdad means to forsai. It's divided up. This case gets this law, and this case gets that law, and not both laws for both cases. That's what litzdad means. It's divided to each one goes to a side. Goes like this. When he says he does yibam, that's an isser mitzvah. That's when it's only a rabbinic prohibition, and that's why biblically the yibam works. Cholatzla, when he says he does chalitza, that's isser kedusha. That goes on the Torah prohibition but it's for a Kohen prohibition. Masiv Rava has another question. Pitzua daka. Pitzua daka. These are a type of men that are not supposed to get married. This pitzua daka means his testicles are crushed. Krushavcha is he has a cut on his organ that he can't have children. Saris, or if he's a eunuch, for something was cut also inside. It wasn't cut off, but it was cut inside. Sris Adam, it's cut by operation. Ba'azakin, or someone that's an older, can't have children. So what's he supposed to do for yibam? So it says oicholten oy miyabmin. Wow, do yibam or chalitza? Kate said, what's going on over here? Mesu, let's say they were married to a woman, v'lahem achim, and they have brothers. So one of these people that was not supposed to be married is married, and they have brothers. V'lahem nashim. Going back on the people that were married originally that passed away, they have wives.
How this prohibition just applies to men who are
Infertile,
fertile, more or less, but not
not for women.
yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
on
the
court.
Torah is against man.
No,
The brothers got up and they did mimer on the wives. V'nasnu get. Or they did a get, v'chaltzu. They did chalitza. Masha asu asu. Everything is effective. Vimbalu. And if they actually did yibum, they had intimacy. So kanu. It actually worked. Even though they weren't allowed to get married. Mesuachim v'amdulahem. Let's say these were not the ones that were married. This is the brother of the one that was married. Now they're the ones that are going to become the yavam. Can the prohibition of yibum push off this negative prohibition that these fellows should not become married? And these fellows did mimer. They did it in the end, or they did a get they did it chalitza masha asu asu vimbalu. Let's say they actually had intimacy with these women that were now the widows of their brother. So kanu, but they can't keep them married. So the yibum did take effect, but they can't remain married. If the way you wanted to say it before was that there's actually a pasuk that tells me that you can't do yibum for these women in balo on my kanu. So why does yibum actually work? The Torah tells me that you don't do yibum. I have a pasuk for that. Ela marava almana mina erisin nami yaseh v'leisa sehu. Why'd we get into this? Why'd we have to say that this was a pasuk that was telling me that the almana from erisin, from betrothal, doesn't do yibum? We quoted a pasuk for that to tell me that. But now we've disproved that there's a pasuk for that. What we're saying now is that the almana mina erisin is also has an asay, also has a positive command. You have to be sanctified, and that's the positive command. So Gemara says, "Mamzeres and nesina ma'ikla meimar." What about the mamzeres and nesina? Over there, it's a negative prohibition. You said you can't do yibum. It says that's also an asay. Ksivis kadishtem. The whole Torah works like that. The ksivas kadishtem, it says that you should be sanctified. There's always a positive command on every mitzvah in the Torah should be sanctified. Let's leave it by Ela Marava. I don't want to rush, but we'll do Ela Marava tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good day, everyone.
Thank you.